Hello everyone, today we're going to be going over uploading intersections into Vena. We'll be going over how to do that directly to the cube and also setting up some integration channels, sources, destinations, and even a drill transactions table. Okay, so if you look at our model here, in the last video we went over how to upload intersections, and I've got a really basic model here, and it's more than likely that your model or the model that you're working on is going to be much more complex, but just stay with me here. It's pretty These dimensions are pretty standard amongst most models here, okay? So the first thing you're gonna need to be able to do this upload data is you're gonna need a data set. Okay, now what I have here as my data set is just some transactions for each entity. Now here's the really important thing to note when you're uploading data. What you need for your file is you need to have each dimension populated or have some value for each dimension in mind, and then of course the value that you'll be uploading. Okay, so in our case here we have, and just stay with me, we have our account, entity, period, year, scenario, measure, and currency. Okay, those are our dimensions. That means the intersections that we're gonna be uploading, they need to intersect somehow with each one of these dimensions. Now that doesn't mean it needs to be fully utilized. Okay, like for example, you might be uploading rates, you might be uploading exchange rates, for example, but those exchange rates aren't necessarily tied to a specific entity within your data model, which is completely fine. In that case, you might be uploading your rates to an account called rates, and the entity might just be no entity, which is completely fine. So long as you first go into your data model, you click on entity, and you have a member, which in this case, if we're saying no entity, we just need to make sure that we have an entity, and we just need to make sure we have a member called no entity, so that when we're gonna be loading our data, that data has somewhere to go to. Okay, but ideally for things like transactions or these kind of intersections, they would be hitting each of these dimensions, just so that you can be more flexible with your reporting. Okay, so in this case, what I have here in my intersections file, it was in the other tab. I have, for example, for my first dimension of account, a bunch in account 1000. This is the entity that they'll be going to, the period, the year, the scenario, the measure, the currency, and so forth. Okay, I'll go over more so in other videos about how this measure and currency dimension, how they might look a little bit redundant in this example, but we'll explore that more later. Just trust me on that one. Okay, so inside Vena, you could do two things to go about uploading data. We're gonna head over to our ETL, because that's the home of where we process, do all these jobs and all this backend kind of work. Okay, we're gonna head over to add template. Select type, file to cube, select data type, and values. Okay, you can just call this import values direct. Okay, now this isn't necessarily best practice, but it's really good to know how to push values directly into the Vena cube, because it's possible that, let's say you're doing your budget cycle, and for some reason there's some value inside Vena that just shouldn't be there, or maybe budget cycle isn't the best example, but let's say you're going throughout your implementation, you're doing some testing, things change, and all of a sudden there's some old data in there. Well, you want to be able to export data from the cube, adjust the value to whatever it needs to be, 0, blank, whatever, and import that straight to the cube without having to do any template mapping or anything like that. Okay, so we have our file here, and we're going to take this and we're going to just import data, and just note here that I'm going to be in my cube. Let me just go to mine. Let me see, account, balance sheet. You can preview intersections actually to see what data is living in the cube as we speak, and you'll see that we have nothing right now. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, go to my data, go to my ETL, import values direct, choose my file, and it's just gonna be that intersection file that I had. Okay, Now we're gonna head over to our history. Oh, and we're gonna see that we have an error. This is a good thing to learn from here, because in our file, there was actually, now let's take a look here. If we take a look at our file, come on, don't yell at me, Excel. Why are you yelling? What is, oh, okay. There we go. Okay, if we look at our file here, you'll notice that there's some values associated to non-entity specific. Okay, and if we head over to our Vena cube, you'll notice in the entity dimension, because of an example in a previous video, this non-entity specific is a parent within our existing dimension. And if you don't know, you can't actually save data inside Vena to a parent level member. Okay, and that's what this error is basically telling us, right? Is a parent in the dimension of entity. So our solution right now, what we're gonna need to do, take this non-entity and make it into bottom level, which in this case, all you really need to do is remove everything below it. So I'll take Boston, I'll put it up there. And now, I mean, really, we don't need this because it's shared, it's for a previous example, it's fine. We have our non-entity specific, which is now bottom level. So now let's go ahead and try re-uploading these values again. Okay, we're gonna take that, check our history now, and woohoo, it has completed. Okay, but let's take a look here at this view details tab, because this is very useful when you start building more complex integrations inside Vena. Because it's very insightful into what has taken long, what data is being outputted at each step, and where the process might be need to be improved. So in this case, we could see actually in our first step here, and keep in mind we're going straight to the cube, so there's not many transformations going on, but we could see the time it took in our first step. We could see the data that has changed, the values that have been added, and we can actually export that data set that was loaded into Vena if we click this here, which is can be really, really useful for troubleshooting. Okay, so if we go back now to our data model and we go and preview some intersections, aha, we see that we actually have some data inside Vena now. Okay, great. But in reality, your data isn't going to be this clean. There's going to need to be steps that need to happen before you can actually upload stuff into Vena and begin reporting on things. Okay, which in that case, and just for the case of our example, I'm going to remove this data, and I'll make a separate video on versioning on how you can easily remove data in a better way. I'm going to delete the actual member, which is, you should probably never do that. I'm just doing it just because, you know, non-live environment, I can. But we just effectively removed all the data in Vena because everything was attached to that scenario, okay? So now, I'm gonna go over how to kind of do it for real. Okay, so if we head over to data transformations, go over to channels, and you'll see there's a whole lot of garbage in here, but I'm just gonna create my own testing, I'm gonna call it sandbox channels, I don't know, okay? I'm gonna head over there, yours might be empty, okay? Now what I'm gonna go and do is I'm gonna look at my import file, okay, my data set, which in this case looks like this. Okay, this is our data set. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a table inside of Vena that I wanna hit first so that I can begin working with this data. Okay, and in order to do that, we're gonna head over to this view here, and just to remind you, that's in modeler, data transformations, channels. I just created a new folder, and now I'm gonna go over in here and click create Vena table. Okay, I'm gonna give this table a name. It's pretty common to prefix these tables by VT, indicating Vena table. I'm just gonna say data underscore import, okay? And I'm gonna add columns, and this is generally best practice, that even if you don't need all of these columns inside Vena, you're gonna want just your initial table to have them, just for the ease of process. Because oftentimes, these data sets are a direct export from another source, and we wanna do as little manual intervention from that export into Vena. Okay, so it's a lot easier if we take that raw export, upload it straight to Vena, and then do those transformations that we need. Okay, so in this case, I don't have column header names because of this, but I'll name them anyways, and it has, let me see here, what we really need is 8 columns. Okay, so I'm gonna come back here, add, trust me, it's better to do all these, figure out, and then do all this, because it's really annoying how, look, I scroll down, I click add a column, boom, it shoots you to the top. So just FYI, a lot easier if you do all your add fields first and then go about naming them, okay? So I'm gonna name this entity, account, entity, period, year, scenario, measure, currency, value. Okay, and then we're just gonna pick the data model that we want this to live in, which mine is right here, and boom, we have just created our Vena table. And now it's ready to get some data inside there. Okay, so in order to do that, we're gonna actually head over back to our ETL view here. But now when we go to create this, instead of pushing to the Vena cube, we're actually gonna file to a Vena table. Okay, and in here, we're gonna name this, I don't know, import data, and I'm gonna call this, and make sure this is the exact same name, this table name, as the same as what we just created right here. Okay, so VT data import, I'm gonna click add, and now I'm gonna click save. We're gonna come back and add some more steps into this later, but as of right now, we're gonna click run, we're gonna choose our file, and we're gonna upload it straight into there. And we're gonna click our history, we see that it has completed, and now if we go back to the integration here, and we right-click VT data import, we could see preview loading that there's no data. Huh? Why? Oh, did I do the wrong? Sorry. I did the wrong job. I apologize. And there's 2 things called import data. Okay. What are you? Yep, you can be removed. You're embarrassing me. Okay, import data, choose file, intersections, import, history, error. Okay, good. Another good point here. The number of columns in your file needs to equal the number of columns inside your Vena table. Okay, and that's why I was saying earlier that's a lot easier if you just set up all the columns, regardless of if you'll need them or not, that are in your file. So in this case, we have this ETL job ID, which was just from a previous extract, which we don't need at all. So I'm just gonna remove that. I'm gonna go back to my ETL, import data, choose file, intersections, take that, import. Now if we go to history, refresh, it's gonna take some time. Job is currently running, la-di-da, come on, boom! Complete, and now, don't embarrass me, preview data, dun, da, 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 boom! We have our data in a table inside Vena, ready to be manipulated now. Okay, so how we do this, there's a couple ways to go about this in Vena, one of which, if you're really good in SQL, this might be the best way for you. You could go click source, VenaQL, and you could actually select all of these fields from this table you have created and manipulate them in any way you want. So just as a quick example here, you could preview this data. You could say select account from, and you can copy to clipboard this, like that, view your current source, and you need to refresh it because Vena is annoying in that way. Current source, come on. Really, just get refreshed. Boom. You see, and now you can manipulate the Vena pretty much in SQL however you want. Okay, of course, you won't just do one account, but you understand. But even easier, what you can do is you can add something called an integration channel. Okay, and what this does is that it basically allows you to manipulate data through Excel formulas, which if your transformations needed aren't super complex, it can be very useful. Okay, so we're gonna add source. I kind of forgot, I blanked out there because I was talking. you need to select that table you just created. So mine was called VT underscore data underscore importer. I click that, and now we have all the fields available to us in that table. Note that if you had created a SQL query off of that data, you could have went in here and also selected that query and gone the fields after any transformations populated right here as well. Okay, and we're also going to select a destination, which in my case is going to be Vena. I'm going to select the model, which is mine right here. Data type intersections. And note here the aggregation mode. Okay, so Vena, if it's unique, it's going to assume that every intersection here is unique. And basically what this means is if we were to remove this value right here, right? It's going to look at this record and it's going to say, okay, is there any other record inside Vena? Sorry, is there any other record in this table that looks the same, excluding that value, right? So if we had, for example, this right here, and it was 20, and it was 40, notice that it's going to the same account, the same entity, in the same period, in the same year, the same scenario, the same measure, the same currency. Then Vena, if you select unique, it's going to expect that this isn't possible, that you can't have duplicate intersections like this. If you select the aggregation mode of sum, it's going to take this 20 and 40 and aggregate it and then put it under this in this intersection right there. Okay. Then you also have options here for these clear slices. Okay, and what this is Vena's way of basically maintaining the most relevant and up-to-date data. Okay, so for example, if we were to choose to clear data based off of just period and year, what this is going to do is when we upload a data file inside of Vena, it's going to look at the period and the year, and if, for example, better to explain this by example. So in here we see period 5, 2020. If our slice is set for only period and year, it's going to remove all data associated with 5 and 2020 and replace it with whatever's inside this file. Okay? So the assumption oftentimes for uploading data is that you're going to be uploading a full period's worth of data at the very least. You cannot do half a period and then another half period and then expect it to aggregate somehow. That's just not possible inside of Vena. Okay, so that's clear slices. So oftentimes what we do is we do period, year, and scenario is really common. Maybe currency if you're multi-currency too, but that three is a very common combination. Just because for your actuals, you're going to want the most up-to-date stuff, right? So cool. Boom, we selected that. We have our table, and we have our ending point, which is Vena on the aggregation mode of sum. Okay, now what we can do is we can actually take account. We can drag it over here, and we can say, okay, when I run this, I want whatever is in this account field to just be pushed right into Vena. But if, let's say, for example, this entity field, let's say we need to manipulate it in some way. Well, we can actually add a formula mapping like this. Go entity, drag it to entity, drag it to entity, like this. And now what we could do is we can come in here and we could say equals, and input is that input entity at the very bottom. Say input entity, like this. This would just be whatever is coming from our mapping table. Not our mapping, but our Vena table there. And we can also say something like anything basically Excel capable can be done here. So we could say equals input entity, and we could say ampersand, ampersand, hello. And now this is going to concatenate every record inside that table, every entity inside that table with hello. Right? You can see how useful this can be for converting stuff into, for example, a fiscal year and period, where you could take the period and the year, and you can use the EO month formula and adjust that with however your fiscal year aligns. But for the purpose of this example, we're just going to take our period. We're going to actually click map by name, and automatically, boom, it maps all this stuff out for us here. Okay, great. So now if we were to click run, and I'll just remove this here, boom. Now if we were to click run, it's going to push all this data inside of Vena, right? But what's better to do is go back to our ETL modeler, go to our import data, click edit, and now go to integration channel and find, oh goodness, what was it called? Transform data. That's what mine was called. Good luck finding mine. Transform data, boom. Add that here. So now when we go to upload our file, it's going to automatically trigger that job we just created. Okay? So also what you can do, just note, you can also preview the output of this channel. If you're doing lots of transformations, you can be doing lots of mappings and so forth, and you can export this to do some analysis inside of Excel. Okay? There are some other options here as well. You can add an unpivot mapping, which basically allows you to unpivot the data. So, for example, if you were loading in balances for a balance sheet, and you had across the columns, you had the balances of periods 1 through 12. You could take that. Imagine this was periods 1 through 12. Take all of that, put it into one value, into one mapping here, and then what you would do is you would take that, put it into value. I mean, you could put it into value, and then you would put it into the period dimension. In that example, and I know I've probably just lost 99% of people, and I realized halfway through, okay, this is probably not very, very useful for right now. But that would be unpivoting. And you can also add a table mapping, which is very useful, where you could basically create a source, and we'll probably go over that sometime later using mapping tables. But what you could do is you could basically take an account, put it into here, not just account, any field. You could take it, put it into the mapping section here, give it a output. You could select a table source, and then I'm going to just do this random one, and then you could select a field, and you could select an output and the behavior of that mapping, right? So basically it's going to look through this mapping table. It might look, on this example, it'll look for the account, and whatever this table is, you can make it whatever you want. I just picked some random one just for this example. And then you can output something based off that input, right? So it can be very, very useful. Okay, so this is us pushing this straight to the Vena cube here, if you were to run this. But when you push stuff to the Vena cube, there's a very nice feature in that you can drill down or do drill transactions. But there is some setup needed for that drill transactions piece on the back end. Okay? So what we're going to need to do to facilitate that is we're going to need to create another table here. And I'm just going to call this BT underscore transaction underscore table. And I'm going to take my 8 dimensions. I think it'll be 16 in total. Okay. So now what we need to do for this transaction table, we need to have our source fields that we want to see when we're going to be drilling on a transaction, in addition to our Vena fields. Okay, so right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this is my Vena fields, and you need to make sure that these fields are spelt the exact same way as the dimensions inside Vena. Okay, so inside this table, we need to see, for example, if I go to my members, account, entity, period, year, scenario, measure, currency, all spelled the exact same way in this transaction table. So right here, I'm going to start off right here. I'm going to say, where is it? Account, entity, period, year, scenario, measure, value, currency. Okay, and that's our Vena dimensionality. From this point, now you can add any field that you had in that import file to do some subsequent stuff with. So like, let's say you had some invoices, invoice number, memo description, some other ID, some other stuff, okay? We have any of those other fields you might want. I'm gonna delete these because we don't need those. Put this in my model, create. And now what we're gonna do is, after that's created, bip bop scoop, we're gonna go to channel, stream to transaction table. We're gonna add our source, and our source is that same import table that we did at the very beginning. So VT data import, but this time our destination is gonna be a Vena table. Okay, and I'm gonna search it, in my case, VT data import. Nope, that is wrong. It was VT transaction table. And here, we're gonna wanna slice it in the same way that we're slicing our import into Vena, which in our case was period, year, and scenario. Just so we make sure that data is always lining up on both ends. Okay, so I'm gonna save that. And now we can map by name. And now I know it's tough to imagine here, but imagine we had much more fields on the left here from our import. Like we would have had our invoice, we would have had our memo description, our ID, all that stuff, we would have had it right here. In which case we could have had there for our drill transaction table. Okay, and I'll go over another video drilling down and setting up that table inside of a template. For the time being, this is how you would go about setting stuff in the back end. And in the case that there are some, as a learning thing, maybe not in the drill table, you do need to always populate these fields. And there is a fixed mapping, which lets you just connect basically a value that will be true for each record. And that's required for any of these processes to run. Okay, so I'm just gonna fill these up with just nulls. Null. Paste this, so everything will have a value. Okay, and now we're just gonna go back to the very beginning of our ETL. We're gonna edit it one more time, and we're gonna do integration channel, and this is gonna be our stream. Okay, stream to transactions. Am I losing my mind? Probably. Am I crazy? It should be here. Stream to transaction table. Have I lost my mind? I refuse to accept that I've lost my mind. I guess. Okay, what is going on here? Oh, maybe I need to, hold on, maybe I need to refresh. Please, geez Louise. Sorry, it's late. Integration channel, please. Stream transaction table. There we go. Boom. Now just note that you want to make sure that your last step in all these processes is always that push to Vena. Okay, because it could mess some things up if it's not the last step. I'm not sure why, but it just does. Okay, now if we save this, now if we import and choose our file, do our transactions, upload that, we head over to our history, and now we could see each step going through, populating our transaction table and also pushing our data into Vena. Note that this is obviously a pretty simplistic view of things. I'll make another video maybe going over how you can use a mapping table from Excel, upload into Vena, how you could unpivot some stuff and so forth. But I think for the time being, that's a pretty good idea of how, of a usual process in how you would have upload into a table, have that table push into Vena, and have that in parallel kind of pushing into a transaction table. Okay? I hope this was helpful in some way to somebody. And if you enjoyed this video, I appreciate it. Thank you.